I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Albuquerque Police Oversight Board. Welcome, those of you who are here. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest in this subject, which obviously all of us are interested in as well. So let's do the pledge. Okay. Public comments. First on our list is Mr. Jim Larson.
Okay, I'm going to get the bell rung in 3 minutes. So, Chair Fine, members of the board, thank you for this opportunity. According to their recent fifth status report, the city and APD remain committed to devoting every resource, every staff member, and idea to the reform called for by the CASA. The statement, while reflecting some commendable achievements, misrepresents a significant failure. I prepared a diagram to highlight the failure in case my comments are unclear. In the majority of complaint investigations, the Chief of Police fails to comply with two sections of the Police Oversight Ordinance. One, within 30 days of receipt of the decision of the POB, the Chief of Police shall notify the POB and the original civilian complainant of his or her final disciplinary decision in writing by certified mail. Two, if the Chief does not accept the disciplinary recommendations of the POB, he shall respond in writing within 30 days with the reason the recommended discipline was not imposed. Evidence is not available to infer that the Chief's inaction is purposefully planned, but the result is a rebuff of both the POB and civilian complainants and leaves an uninformed public left to conjecture about the Chief's commitment to accountability and civilian oversight. So far, the Chief has not been held accountable for his noncompliance. It remains uncertain if the Chief will comply in the future, when he will comply, and who will ensure his accountability. The POB should not limit their lengthy pursuit of the Chief's compliance by securing notification only for the POB. Given the continuing difficulties experienced by the POB, they must also pursue compliance with the Chief's notification to the civilian complainants, for if they do not, who will? Concurrently, the letters sent by the POB to complainants at the completion of the investigation of their complaint do not include the POB disciplinary recommendations to the Chief. This omission and the Chief's noncompliance leave the complainant totally in the dark with respect to discipline absent an inspection of public records request. These are serious issues that should have been resolved earlier than 30 months into the new oversight process. If you take a quick look at the diagram, one of the things I want to call out is that the director writes the complainant response letter, and he's the only one that gets information from APD's personnel records. He writes a summary for you all, as I understand it, and then he sends that to the Chief. Only the Chief's letter has a recommendation attached to it. That should be, in my view, it should be a public record. So the response provided to the complainant has no disciplinary action, and the Chief is not responding. So if I was a complainant, have no idea what's going on, which seems to run counter to the idea of transparency, partnership, and oversight. Thank you.
I want to comment. Mr. Larson presented this information to us at our CRC meeting, Case Review Committee meeting, and we were grateful because we agree. We asked Mr. Harness, was there a reason that our disciplinary recommendations were not included in the letter we sent to complainants? And the answer was it had not been done before, but there was no reason not to do it. So we decided that we would bring that recommendation to this board, that we do include with clear language in the letter that we send to respondents what our recommendations are in the case where we have a disciplinary recommendation. We also, the other thing that came up that Mr. Larson brings up in this presentation that's outside of our bailiwick is that we do not know, the communication between the chief and the complainant is something we don't know about. We're not in that loop. That's not something we can make happen or not make happen or anything. We're not in that loop. But we can talk about what we have done and what we are recommending. I think we have assured Mr. Larson and others that we are in fact pursuing and making progress, and I think you've heard it here at our last meeting with the expressing why a written response is so important to the letters that we send to the chief, so that we can learn as a community how the police see things differently from the way we as a body and other civilians see things. And that is the only way that we move forward together. And that is the purpose of doing this, is to increase communication and enhance communication between law enforcement, APD in particular, and this body and as a representative of the community. So it's really important that we do that. But to your point, Mr. Larson, I'm not sure that in the ordinance it says the chief has to respond to civilians' complaints. I know he has to respond to us. So Mr. Baker, can you tell us, is there anything in the ordinance or the CASA that says the chief has to communicate directly with civilians?
Chair Fine, I'll have to look to double check the procedure on that. I wasn't prepared to address it at the moment, but I can look and later in the meeting supplement.
Okay, so we'll bring that up and we'll add it to the minutes. Whatever your findings are, can we do that?
Sure.
Okay, that way
Sure,
it'll
fine.
be there. Yes, ma'am.
Chair Fine, I have a question for Mr. Larson, and it's something that I'm curious about. I was wondering, of course, we're going to have Mr. Baker look up the requirements, but as a person who's a citizen, I'm sure there are other people who are interested. What would make you, in terms of accountability, what would feel satisfactory to you, and if to hold the chief accountable? What action, how would you see that playing out so that the community would feel, satisfied with his response?
Well, I think the community would be satisfied with the response if he just followed the statute. I can tell you that what I read to you, I quoted out of the statute about the civilian complainant. I probably have it highlighted, but I'm sure Mr. Baker will be able to figure that out. I think that it's, the problem that I saw was going through the records on the website and trying to come up with some sense of how many complaints did you guys make recommendations for, and how many did the chief support or not support. And until your last board meeting, there were virtually almost no responses from the chief. And then when I looked at those responses, all it said was, hey, I don't agree with this, and this is what I think, not why I think this. So my response would be that the chief let the complainant know, just like he should let you know, I agree and I'm imposing this discipline. I don't agree and I'm not imposing this discipline, and these are the reasons why. Otherwise, we have and I know, Chairman Fine, that the statute does not call for your oversight of his response to the citizens. However, I would say it's clear that he has to respond to you all, and he's not responding to you all. So if I'm a citizen, how do I enforce that? The only way I could think of it is to come to you and say, maybe you can talk to them as a body and urge them to comply. Otherwise, we have to try to form another organization of complainants to try to force the chief to take some action.
I think that's a very good point, but Dr. Ring has something he wants to say.
Mr. Larson and Chair Fine, this is wonderful. I appreciate it very much. But to clarify and to make it more exacting, this group has been in existence this is our 26th month. We were established in February of 2014, and we were not permitted by the statute that established us to begin reviewing cases for approximately the first 6 months because we had to receive quite a bit of training. And so it's really more accurate to say not 30 months, but 20 months that this has continued. Now, that's a long time regardless, but let's be accurate about it.
Don't go away, because I have another question. Do any of you, I don't want to step on anybody else's.
Chair Fine, I'd like to respond to that if I could.
Oh, sure.
Chair Fine, Board Member Ring, I fully understand that. I appreciate the fact that you all chose to review all of the old cases rather than just start over, and I appreciate that. However, this is fairly clear in the statute, and I feel like it's a pretty egregious oversight, and 20 months is still a long time, although I understand fully and I appreciate the work that you all are doing. Thank you.
Okay.
As you're talking, I'm thinking of how we can solve this problem. So first and foremost, I want you to know that we are in hot pursuit, and we will not be out of hot pursuit until we reach compliance with us getting letters. And I believe that Major Tyler is here and that they are working on it. That way we have made this very clear in every forum we have access to. And we have not stopped, we will not stop until we get answers, and we get answers that include why. So we all recognize that there are, not only are the whys not in the letter, but if, let's say, there are 4 findings and one of them says sustained and 2 say unfounded and 1 says exonerated, if the chief says the sustained one I think should be exonerated, we're still missing the other 3. Okay, so there's 2 layers of what's wrong with those letters. So we're still in pursuit of that, and we're not stopping, okay, for starters. And I believe that the police department has heard us on that point and is working to that end, and I'm sure Major Tyler can speak to that. But in the meantime, as we get those letters moving forward, and we include, let's say we include in our letters the discipline we recommend. Now we finally, because we are pursuing until we get it, we get the chief's letter. Once we get the chief's letter, we can post it online. That's a public record. That means we can share it with the person who complained. We can do that. Whether the chief can do that or wants to do that or has to do that is another question. But once we got the letters, we would not be prevented, because it's public record, to share it with the complainant. So that would solve the problem. They would have a letter that had our recommendations for discipline and the police recommendations and their whys for why they agree with us or not. And the complainant would have both. Does that make sense?
Chair Fine, yes, it does make perfect sense, and it would require that your letter to the original letter to the complainant says that
When
you
we
can
get
get
it,
on the
you'll have
web
it.
page and see that. Because right now, it's, as you know, is unclear when it says you can, if you disagree with the chief's discipline, you can contact the city administrator.
Yeah, we're trying to cover too
right.
many bases in that letter.
I'd like to make it clear, though, that I'm very supportive. My purpose is to get the chief's attention and have him comply with the law. And I feel that if you could at least communicate to him as a body that this has been an issue that's been raised by complainants, and I can get a bunch of complainants to come in if that's what's necessary, but I don't think that's what a productive use of your time.
No, I think we're all complainants too in this department. So I appreciate your attention to this detail and your efforts to try to find some sense and make some recommendations. So thank you for that. I appreciate your efforts. Mr. Baker.
Chair Fine, I can close the loop on the ordinance issue.
Okay.
The way it's drafted would track with what you described. It doesn't have a provision that in the normal course, when a recommendation from the board goes to the chief, that the chief then, in the typical case, has to respond to the complainant, but we're working on getting the letters back to the board, which would then be available. The ordinance contemplates the chief corresponding directly with the complainant if there's an appeal, request for hearing, following the determination. And then after that process, that's where there's discussion of the chief directly corresponding with the complainant.
Okay, so just to be clear, there's two appeal processes, okay? One, and that's what we're talking about in our letter, the part that's confusing, and we're fixing that. But when we are saying you can appeal our decision, but if you want to appeal the chief's decision, you have to contact them. We can't do that appeal. That's not our bailiwick. However, if we say in our findings, this is what we're recommending to the chief, and within this period of time, we should receive a letter should be available to us that is what the chief's view of this is, then that's one thing, okay? We could send that letter to them because it's a public record. But if they want to appeal, what Mr. Baker is saying is, if they want to appeal the issue with what the chief decided, that's when the chief has to respond to them directly and not until then. Is that right? Am I hearing you right, Mr. Baker? That is the only requirement in there, that he respond directly to the complainant when they're appealing his decision.
Chair Fine, just one minor clarification on that. It's when the board has made a recommendation and then, the board has done its initial review and then the complainant appeals to the board.
To us?
To the board.
Oh,
And
okay,
then
my bad.
if the board alters its findings and sends that on to the chief can reconsider, and then at that point contemplates the chief sending something back to the complainant and the board.
So there's nothing that, unless in that circumstance, there's nothing that requires the chief to directly communicate with this civilian that's making a complaint.
That's my read of this, which doesn't surprise me since this is the ordinance that deals with the POB procedures and as
Right.
opposed to the chief's disciplinary decision outside the POB process.
Okay. Well, then, my bad. I'm sorry.
Chair Fine, members of the board, I'm not an attorney, but if you look at section 941-8 under the civilian complainant procedures, I think it says, within 30 days of receipt of the letter outlining the POB findings and recommended discipline, unless a hearing is requested by the civilian complainant, the chief of police shall notify both the POB and the original civilian complainant in writing by certified mail of his or her final decisions regarding any unfounded, that's the proposed language in your new statute, but what I just read is there.
You see that, Mark? It's moments like this where I'm really grateful somebody else in the room is a lawyer.
I don't mean to be argumentative, Chair
No,
Fine.
we want to be clear. That's fine.
It's section 8, paragraph C. It's the last part of paragraph C.
It is true.
I stand corrected.
Okay. Mr. Larson, thank you again. I think that we need to be clear on this point since we're confused. It might be nice for us to share our clarity, newfound clarity on this point with the chief in writing a letter to him for my signature. Could you do that?
Yes, Chair Fine, and sorry for missing it the first round. It's just
No, that's fine.
working on the
I
fly.
just think that it's important that we be super clear about what's expected of everybody, us, the chief, everybody. So unless we do that, we're going to step on each other's toes time and time again and not get to the finish line. Okay? Thank you, Mr. Larson.
Thank you.
So I think the end of that is that our recommendation for the CRC, it will come in Leonard's report, but what we will go back to is we're going to change our letters so that they include the discipline. That's the recommendation from the committee, and we'll deal with that when we get to Leonard's report. Okay. All right.